Thank you. And that's just a little bit about our association, WiCyS. And in Australia, we have approximately 40 members, and we just have started last year. Without further ado, again, I'd like to welcome all our attendees, including our attendees from the United States and our affiliates across the globe as well. And a few reminders to put yourself on mute, and we are recording this session, so please turn off your camera if you don't wish to be part of the recording. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Michelle Bendschneider. Michelle is the Executive General Manager of Privacy and Cyber Technology at the Commonwealth Bank, with a wonderful background in software engineering and leadership in product, digital transformation, professional services, sales and operations. Michelle has worked at Telstra, where she led the creation of Business Technology Services Group. And prior to that, she had an extraordinary career with IBM for 14 years, where she led Australia and New Zealand BPO business globally. Michelle is joined by two of our wonderful leadership members in WiCyS Australia, and that is Jane Arriagada and Kevin Crowley. Good morning to you all.
Morning, Anita.
Morning.
Thank you, Kevin. Would you like to make a start with the first question?
Yes, I would. Just good morning, Michelle. Thank you very much for joining us today. I suppose I'd like to ask you to kick us off this morning to give everyone a bit of background on how you entered into the field of privacy and your career journey that has taken you up to this point.
Thanks, Kevin, and good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you've joined from. Great to be with you today. I'll just check that you can hear me. So maybe, yeah, thank you, Jane, for the confirmation. Look, what I might do to respond to that question, Kevin, is perhaps just share a little bit about the path that took me to getting involved with the domains of cybersecurity and privacy. So as Anita introduced, I started life as a software engineer. And from there, I actually, took on quite a breadth of roles across various different disciplines, always in technology or very close to technology and in many industries. So I spent several years in the consulting industry deploying ECP transformations and various other enterprise solutions, worked in multiple industries doing consulting at IBM, and I guess much like many large technology organizations, I had the opportunity to have many careers within the one company. So I worked in professional services, delivery, owning client portfolios, managing client relationships, getting involved with large outsourcing deals in the world of software, in infrastructure. So I had a breadth of experience across those different dimensions of technology. But I also took the opportunity to have experiences in delivery, in sales, in business development, client relationship management, and eventually running industry sectors or lines of business for IBM, which was a really great way of just understanding the breadth of technology, the various aspects of delivery and engagement into different industries and what role technology plays. I then moved to Telstra, and for our North American members, that would be the equivalent of your AT&T, so large legacy incumbent telco provider in Australia, had a really rich and large footprint of customer base, both in retail and in enterprise, but really needed to transition and transform its capabilities from pure telco into bringing in technology products and technology services in order to be able to serve its enterprise customer base. And so I had the privilege of joining Telstra to stand up a technology services practice. And it was really like, building Australia's biggest startup in one of its largest corporates. And I did that through a combination of, organic hiring as well as acquisitions, which was great. And it was in this role that I first was introduced to cybersecurity. One of the areas that Telstra had an ambition to build its capability in was to have a really rich cybersecurity portfolio, which it had to serve itself internally, but didn't have to offer its customers. And many of its mid-market and even its larger enterprise customers were really crying out for cybersecurity capability, particularly because there is such synergy with network and connectivity and cybersecurity. And so my foray into cyber was in identifying what capabilities existed in market, were they synergistic with Telstra's capabilities, were they strategic for growth, and eventually identifying organisations which could be great candidates for acquisition into Telstra. And so I got involved with identifying such an organisation, and it was the first of several that, together with the broader Telstra team, we worked with, acquired, integrated, and then had the opportunity of sponsoring further growth in that space. So I got to work with incredible cybersecurity professionals that were on the cutting edge of technology. We're working with many of the world's large, leading tech providers in cybersecurity, and we're at that forefront of innovation, which was really, really wonderful. I then went on to run the product group for Telstra Enterprise. And again, one of the first things that I did there was to stand up a cybersecurity product portfolio, brought in product development team, had the organisation's support to invest in a couple of state-of-the-art security operations centres, built more capability through acquisitions and organic growth. And so got really involved in that pillar, as I did with other product portfolios, but that was the focus on cybersecurity. And on privacy, it was just such a growing space in my time in running products for Telstra Enterprise. Because as you can imagine, telcos like banks and retail organisations and other high-touch industries handle so much customer data and handle so much personal customer data, and in some cases sensitive personal customer data. And so the thoughtfulness that had to go into product design, product creation, thinking carefully about how you use customer data, what customer data you access, how you handled it, how you thoughtfully disposed of it, was just needing to be really front and center into product design, but also the service design for how you would handle customers. So that was, again, my first foray into privacy. We had European operations, so there was obviously waves of GDPR compliance that needed to be taken into account as well. So, that hopefully gives you, I guess, my pathway into both those domains. And whilst I would definitely not claim to be a subject matter expert or a technologist in either domain, I've had to become really immersed, understand it, and really sponsor it to help it thrive and build capabilities in the roles that I've taken on.
Oh, that's fabulous, Michelle. Thank you for your time. And I guess it's actually a good segue into my question that I have for you, because I guess cybersecurity and privacy always sort of goes hand in hand in topics. And with your breadth of skills and, being across multinational companies in multiple industries, I just wanted to, I guess, ask you, because this year's theme's around privacy and making it a priority. Can you share with us some examples of what a great privacy culture looks like and what you have seen worked well?
Yeah, happy to, Jane. And look, I'll touch on 3 areas. I think there are several, but in my experience, there's probably 3 areas that really make a difference. Firstly, and perhaps in many cases, this is also true, it's the role of senior leadership and the tone that's set at that top table. One of the critical success factors in helping, awareness, momentum, prioritization of investment into cybersecurity and privacy is when you have that as a priority at the CEO, board, and senior leadership. When you have a CEO and a board that talks about the topic, that makes it a priority in terms of capital investment, in terms of compliance, in terms of education and awareness, in terms of how resources are allocated, then you tend to get that built into the narrative, and you tend to get that tone washing through the layers of an organization, particularly a large organization, which often has many competing priorities. There's many things going on. There's lots of initiatives. And, you know, when you have that type of an environment, you really need strong narrative from the top. And in my experience, when you have that, it thrives. When you don't have that, it's very, very difficult to sponsor change when you're swimming against the tide, if you like. So that would be the first point. The second point I'd make is when you have a culture of whether you view privacy as, you know, a positive, a differentiator, a value creation opportunity, or whether you view it as a tick in the box, a compliance measure. And when you have the latter, what you tend to see is it's a weak narrative, it's an inconsistent narrative. You have generally staff, and this can translate to partners and other organizations in your value chain that don't really, you know, lean into it, whether it's a problem that needs to be solved or whether it's an opportunity that needs to be upheld and differentiated. And when an organization is able to put up its products, its services, its service value chain, and talk about it in tones where, you know, it gives a level of confidence to the customers, to their partners, and to anybody that comes into the value chain around how your customer data is handled, how your employee data is handled, how secure it is, how transparent the organization is around the use of that data, how well it protects it, manages, disposes of it securely, only uses what is required and only when it is required and contextually, then you tend to differentiate and you tend to build really strong brand credibility, product credibility, confidence, customer retention. And often, you know, when you don't have that, you either don't tend to differentiate as well, or worse, when you have a situation where you have a breach and that isn't handled well, you can suffer tremendous reputational damage. And we've seen that happen in organizations and government, you know, in multiple geographies. So to me, talking about it in terms of value creation, differentiation, a positive, as opposed to something that you've just got to tick a box and comply with, makes a really big difference. So that's the second point. The third point I'd make is around education and awareness. And again, here I've seen, you know, examples of where organisations have taken a multi-pronged approach to education and awareness, formal education, mandatory learning, mandatory in the sense of you don't get to have access to systems unless you have conducted specific mandatory training. You don't get to actually perform various functions in roles until you've actually proved you have capability to do that, especially in the sense of privacy. Where you have informal sessions, on-the-job training, and, you know, a variety of approaches that land the message, that deepen the awareness, that immerse members of not just your staff, but also your partners and others that you deal with in your value chain. That's a really positive thing. At the other end of the spectrum, you either have none at all, or you have a very minimalistic, tick the box, yes, you know, we've done some training. And again, that doesn't tend to permeate as strongly. You know, one of the best examples that I've seen in this space around education and awareness is when you build in storytelling into the narrative, and when you make it really personal. And privacy is, again, one of those areas that is an incredibly personal realm to talk about. You know, you've got situations where when customers' personal information is inadvertently disclosed, it can result in some really, really dire consequences, including, you know, many cases of things like domestic violence. And so when you build in storytelling and when you build in the personal impact of privacy done well and privacy not done well, it can be a really impactful thing. And I know, from my own experience, becoming aware of what happens when customer data is not handled well it's really, resonated. It's landed in my own brain, and it makes me thoughtful about how I go about it in my role and in my day-to-day life. So they're just three examples which hopefully make sense, and happy to add to more of those.
Michelle, I just wanted to ask around, sometimes with regards to being able to get by in trying to set up a privacy program in an organisation can be a very challenging task. And sadly, sometimes it's not until an actual data breach takes place where the actual leadership really starts to feel the pain when they hear the customer complaints coming through and the harm that's taken place with those customers. It's not until that happens. But sometimes the level of educating those leaders upfront and early really hits the spot and really helps to, I guess, being able to articulate the benefits coming out. As you mentioned, it's not a tick in the box anymore. But being able to actually articulate that benefit and that return on investment is often a challenge for some leadership. Is there something that you can share with us around how you may have had to do that in the past?
I think, yeah, look, some leaders, and this is in the public domain, but some leaders have been really proactive and have really, taken the front foot in volunteering organisations' investment in uplifting their privacy. And Commonwealth Bank is absolutely one such example of an organisation where, the CEO and the leadership team offered an enforceable undertaking to really uplift capability right across the technology, process, and organisational domains. Often, you're right, Anita, it does take an incident, a data breach, reputational damage, or others to really spur an organisation on. And I'd liken it to cybersecurity in many ways. Often it is a ransomware attack or some other form of cyber incident or a threat that prompts an organisation to act, as opposed to take preventative measures to strengthen, its resources and capability. And I think privacy is very similar in that respect. And when you think about it, organisations often focus on the elements that drive more direct shareholder value. How do you increase sales? How do you reach more customers? How do you differentiate in the market? And I think increasingly, what is becoming more evident is some of the elements that enable that are things like having a really strong cybersecurity footprint, having a really strong privacy posture. To my earlier point around being able to demonstrate how having a strong privacy posture actually improves and differentiates your service and your proposition in market. So being able to do that makes a big difference. And, I've certainly seen leaders that have taken that tone, able to get better support from the board around investment, able to get better, strike the right chord in market when they present their results, to talk about where investments are going, because generally the industry more broadly recognises that this isn't a nice to have, it's an essential ingredient, no different to any other strategic enabler.
Thank you, Michelle.
I might follow on. It's a slightly changed tack a little bit, Michelle. So a question about deepening one's career in cybersecurity and privacy. So many of our members are just starting off their careers in privacy and cybersecurity, whether they be a recent graduate or maybe have changed career to move into privacy. So my question is around, what advice would you give to someone who is just beginning their career?
Yeah, look, the first comment I'd make is, congratulations on coming into this domain. You've already made a great choice, because in my view, there's not going to be a lessening of the demand or the need for this capability in every industry. It's not just a tech industry ask, it's every industry. And so the need to have committed, passionate, skilled, and capable resources in cybersecurity and in privacy, and indeed where the marrying of both of that come together, because there are such natural synergies between the two, is a really great choice. So that would be the first thing that I would say. Congratulations on being in the field. The other thing that I would say is, you don't need to be a specialist, but should you wish to do that, that's great. You obviously can't have an industry with depth of capability without specialization. But for those of you who don't see a future on the tools, for want of a better phrase, forever, that's okay. Breadth is also just as good. And, I reflect on my career, and, I would definitely characterize my career as having breadth in many areas. And be comfortable in taking transferable skills with you, and building upon that and creating a really rich tapestry of experiences and capability that you have. And don't discount transferable skills that you may also come with from other domains. So things like project management, architecture, business analysis, technical specialization. They're all great transferable skills. And sometimes cybersecurity as the name of the domain can be daunting. I know this from having spoken to many graduates, from in various roles I've been in, and many others in the realm that I've mentored, that people find it a bit daunting, and there's a certain perception of what type of person should be in cybersecurity. And I would say shatter those perceptions, because it's applicable to everybody, and it's applicable to anybody who has a passion for it and who wants to make a difference. And the other thing that I would say is, and this goes with the breadth point I made earlier, lateral moves can sometimes be just as valuable as vertical moves. And I know that often, when you start off in your career, you're hungry for that next promotion, you're hungry for that next step up. Sometimes reflect and think about what might be an equally valuable lateral move to broaden your experience and your expertise that makes you even more valuable for that next vertical opportunity. So they would probably be the key things that I would say from a, think big picture about your career. I would also say, really invest in skills. Invest in perhaps starting with understanding yourself better, know what you're good at, what you feel passionate about, know what you're not good at and what, doesn't engage you, and make choices consciously following that convergence of what you're good at and what plays to your passion. Get feedback from a wide, variety of sources, and use that to help identify, what you already have, what you can build upon. Try and pick at least one new skill a year, right? It can be a big thing, it can be a small thing, but try and pick that one thing, because this leads me to my next point. It builds that mentality of continuous learning, and it builds that hunger and passion for what do I learn next? What do I know? How do you build that accretive base of knowledge that you've got? And in this industry, and arguably in just about every realm of technology, it's changing so fast and it's evolving so fast that we can't just bunker down and do what we do without keeping our eyes and ears open and our minds open and proactively reaching out. One of the, I think, really positive side effects of the global pandemic has been the accessibility of education, right? Everywhere, anytime, anyhow, from some of the world's leading academic and business schools that we could avail of from the comfort of our home or office or wherever we choose to, which is a great opportunity to get out there and upskill and, if appropriate, reskill. There's industry forums, which you're all obviously in today, which is great. Make an effort in that one small or big thing. Make an effort to connect. Make an effort to be a part of it. Follow a small handful of leading personalities in the industry, listen to what they have to say. Often it creates really great connections as well. My personal advice is don't try and do too many because you'll get overwhelmed and confused. Pick a few, get advice on what those are. And, you know, overall, I think one of the most important things that you'll find in your career and the most valuable things that you will do in your career is to actually invest in your network. You cannot underestimate the value and power of your personal and your professional network. Cherish it. It's incredibly important. Invest in it. We're all busy people. We get distracted. You know, be structured about it. Actually, be mindful about how often you connect with your network, who those key people are. And do it authentically, not from a mindset of ticking a box that yes, you've feverishly attended, you know, this many networking events or coffees, but it's authentically how have you connected, what have you brought to the table, what have you given back, and what do you need from your network, who those people are, what role they play, and they could be different types of networks that you hold for different reasons. But my experience in my career is my single most valuable and cherished thing that I've built through that is my network. And that would be another really important thing to do. I could keep going, Kevin, but I might stop there.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, speaking of networks, we're, as you said, we're in a wonderful community at the moment on this webinar and a wonderful network of people across the globe. Michelle, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the culture of organisations, and we've been talking about education and how easy it is to, you know, develop things and gain access. But I guess, you know, you've worked in global organisations and manage hundreds and hundreds of people. And, you know, our recent, the last report from OAC that was issued in January, you know, referenced that I think it was 38% of, you know, data breaches were as a result of human error in the organisation. And that just, I guess, really reiterates the importance of continuing to educate the employees in the organisation, continuing to educate people on what personal information is. And it's a recurring process that we must undertake frequently. But I guess the challenge is you can have, you know, training material, as you said, it's a tick of the box compliance thing. But I guess the challenge is how do you make it something that's consumable for people to very easily understand what personal information is? And I think over the years, we've seen that really progress quite well, but I think that, and certainly I think you've seen examples where people have used other creative tools, such as creating videos in helping people understand that. But I wanted to get your, you know, your comments and thoughts around what are some, maybe one or two little examples that you've seen that's helped employers understand what privacy is, or even maybe outside of your work environment or your community and at home. What are some of the things that you've seen work well?
One of the most compelling things that I've seen work well is storytelling, Anita. You know, when you have an environment where you have frontline staff in whatever industry it is, right? And you think about a day in their life, right? They're probably on a weekly basis dealing with new product training, new sales or marketing initiatives. You know, their plate is full in terms of what they've got to retain, what they've got to go and achieve on a day-to-day basis, what targets and metrics are set on them. And when you bring in compliance-related education, be it for privacy or other topics, it's really difficult to have that signal stand out from so many other signals that they are being bombarded with every day, week, or month. And so one of the most compelling ways of making it stand out is to make it real and talk about everyday stories that happen. So in a banking environment, you know, you generally have really great customer service staff who want to please, who want to support their customers, who want to deliver a great experience. and helping those staff understand that without proper due process and checks around how to manage that customer data, inadvertently they can reveal information about, in scenarios like joint accounts and others, spouse details that can result in domestic violence. That's a scenario that exists in many industries, but having those real life examples played out and actually told as stories to that frontline staff all of a sudden makes it really personal, and it makes them aware in a much more compelling way than if it was presented in an academic way. So to me, culture through storytelling is much more impactful and much more resonant than more, I guess, high level, more academic presented material. That's definitely one example that I would share in response to that question.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
We've got a
and
question.
we do have another question that's sort of coming through on top of. We do have another question. So it's come through. It's how do you evolve the culture when the staff are resistant to using the technology that will help reduce human error or reduce the impact of human error?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Human error exists again in every industry and in every domain, right? And we've all seen examples of where staff have inadvertently emailed customer details to the wrong customer, or files with thousands and thousands of customer or employee data, and employee data is just as important for privacy as customer data, which we've focused on today. And we see lots of examples of those. In my experience, staff are very rarely reluctant to improve their capabilities or adopt something if it means they get to do their job better, or if it means they deliver a better service. I've rarely encountered resistance within an organization if it means that the staff are able to essentially do a better job and deliver a better outcome. Sometimes when you have a lot of demands on staff to do things that are not perceived to add value to their roles or to how well they do their jobs for their customers, then of course you can get resistance. But generally, deploying technology that enables, that unlocks, that frees up time, that better secures how they do it has generally been well received, provided it's deployed in a way that is articulate about why the change, what the change is there to deliver. There's really strong change impact assessment done, and the impacted staff are brought along the journey. So a lot of the time, it's about getting that change management approach thoughtfully crafted with engagement from the impacted teams as early in the cycle as possible, as opposed to a deploy and then comply. That tends to, invariably be really challenging. But again, I'll go back to the point I made at the start of this conversation. The tone from the top table is incredibly important. And getting strong sponsorship from whether it's your chief risk officer or your CEO or your group executive of retail, or wherever the right voice is about what the change is there to do, what the technology is there to do, why it's important, and contextualizing it often gives a much better catalyst for change.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michelle. I'll just open it up to Jane or Kevin to see if you have any questions for Michelle before we finish up.
Yeah, sure, Anita. Michelle, I guess Privacy is an industry, I guess, that crosses many different areas in an organization. For someone new that's interested in entering into privacy, what would your recommendation be on how they can get into the field? Because I guess when you look at job descriptions, they have, very certain skill sets that they're looking for. But I guess if we're one of our members are interested in getting into privacy, where's a good starting point for somebody?
Yeah, great question. I think there's multiple points of entry, right? So if you're in the world of technology, you may find that, it's a CISO or a chief privacy officer or a designated role within the technology world, within the CIO's office that has accountability. And I would encourage that, you have the right conversations, and if there's a structured career planning approach in your organization, to actually build that into your plan. Look at education and enablement sessions to uplift your awareness of privacy, and start to work towards that. If you're, considering more business-oriented options, most organizations now have, certainly larger organizations have a group privacy officer or a chief privacy officer. And they're either at, again, the top table with the CEO leadership team, or they tend to be in a risk leadership team, or in the leadership team of wherever the greatest customer dealings are, maybe in your retail business or other. And again, the skill sets there are more around understanding privacy obligations and ensuring that the organization is compliant with those privacy obligations, and are deploying processes, people and technology measures to make sure that capabilities are uplifted constantly. And you're also looking ahead to see, well, what's the new legislation coming? What do we need to do to get ready to comply, to be ready to differentiate? So there's opportunities, in my view, in the business. There's opportunities in technology. There's opportunities in the world of risk management, all related to privacy. What you'll tend to find is that the world of privacy in its core sense often tends to attract a lot of people from the legal profession. And they come at it from the point of view of understanding privacy law and obligations to compliance with privacy law. Many of them may be ex-regulators that have come from a regulatory background, understand what the regulator is looking for in an organization, in your industry, and bring a wealth of knowledge. And so there's a great opportunity for members to build a network with those people, build a mentor relationship with them, and actually just understand the environment, understand the landscape, and then think through thoughtfully, well, what are the opportunities where you can bring transferable skills, be they technology, be they business, architecture, or other things, to enter the world of privacy. It's a great investment to make, because we know that for almost every geography, we will continue to have waves of increased legislation, and we're expecting that in Australia.
Indeed. Thank you very much. And that's a great question, Jane. So we're just about a minute away from finishing up our session. And if anyone would like to quickly ask something or provide a comment on anything that resonated to you, please yell out. But Michelle, I wanted to thank you so much for your time today and sharing your experiences and stories. And I'm assuming if people want to connect with you on LinkedIn, you'll be happy to accept their invitation. But we certainly, obviously following the year of 2020, making privacy a priority this year has, I guess, a really great theme. But again, it brings on the accountability for all of us as leaders. We're on the customer service or a BA or risk, as Michelle mentioned, all those different types of roles. Everyone has the responsibility to help make privacy a priority, or to help others understand. Again, thank you so much, Michelle. Before we go, I did want to just quickly share to everyone around the membership that's available through WiCyS, WiCyS.org. We have an affiliate in Australia, of which Kevin, Jane and myself are part of, and there is a special code that you can use to get a price that is comparative price that's listed for US here. So we'll be sending that out as part of our survey in a week's time, and code for you to actually join. So there's lots of opportunities if you're a student or if you're in the academic space. As Michelle mentioned, networking is key to building a career within cyber or in privacy, and being part of an association is an important factor. So without further ado, we thank everyone for joining us from across the globe, from different organisations. Thank you to everyone who's asked the questions and sent them through in advance. Thank you to Michelle again, and thank you to Jane and Kevin for being part of our panel. Have a lovely day, everybody, and please help make privacy a priority. Bye-bye.